Our unique personalities often play a role in forming strategy, decision-making, and problem-solving. We all have opinions and life experiences that shape our outlook, influence how we think, behave, and even treat other people. It's important to be self-aware of that influence because it can also interfere with reaching the best outcome. In this video, I will illustrate what objective reasoning is, why it's important, and examples of how it can be used in the workplace. Objective reasoning is a method of using logic and verifiable facts to support a conclusion. In this process, a person or team actively discounts or eliminates subjective factors or factors that are based purely on opinion and assumption. Through objective reasoning, we determine what is most valuable to our objective and assign relevance to those values. This allows us to follow a framework to ensure we are making decisions that are aligned with our intent. This will become clearer when I discuss examples later in this video, but first, let me explain why objective reasoning is important. Remaining impartial or not letting our personal point of view unduly influence our actions and decisions does not come naturally to human beings. On the contrary, it takes significant effort to keep immaterial opinions and assumptions out of our decision-making process. Objective reasoning helps us be intentional about using meaningful criteria to reach the best outcome, rather than letting subjective material lead us astray. Without objective reasoning, not only are we less likely to reach the best outcome, but we are less likely to even be cognizant of the fact that we could have had a better outcome. Moreover, objective reasoning allows us to capitalize on our mistakes because we can trace outcomes back to the criteria we used during the process and adapt accordingly to continuously improve. Objective reasoning, at least in the context of this video, is about more than just using numbers to make decisions. It's about being self-aware and thinking critically about articulating the best outcome and specifically defining what is needed to reach that outcome. This may be difficult to understand without thinking about objective reasoning in action, so let's take a look at a couple examples. Example number 1, the recruitment process. During the recruitment process, you evaluate people's career journeys and professional experience as they relate to the job you need to fill. In that process, you're also dealing with unique human beings and their personalities. There is a great deal of subjective information to be aware of. To hire someone who is best for the job, you will need to continuously question any subjectivity influencing the process and ensure that decisions are based on factors of real substance. Be disciplined in your decision making and use a rigorous process for evaluating applicants. As an example, a common situation is deciding what level of education is required for a job. There may very well be good reasons to require a particular academic degree from applicants, but your reasoning should be demonstrable. That is, you should be able to show rationally why the actions one must perform on the job require that a candidate has successfully acquired the knowledge and skills that one can only acquire through earning a particular academic degree. Sometimes a hiring department might argue that the degree is needed because the incumbent of the position had that degree, and therefore the successor must also have that degree. That is a logical fallacy. The reason does not support the argument. It assumes the incumbent needed the degree to do the job. The argument does not even stop to ask if the incumbent was good at her job, much less whether the degree was at least a factor that made her good at her job. There are, of course, many other ways personal propensities can interfere with a recruitment process. When you hear people say ambiguous things like, "She just wasn't a good cultural fit," or "I don't think someone with his personality would do well in this job," it should raise a red flag. Such statements may seem to provide a reason for someone's decision, but it is not objective reasoning. Rather, it is based purely on personal tastes and assumptions. Again, it is a natural tendency for this to happen. We may favor a candidate because they like the same football team we like, or we feel an aversion to another candidate because they wore a color that we don't care for. Be aware of this deceptive influence and use a framework that helps maintain impartiality. In the case of the recruitment process, there are a few ways you can do this. Number one, establish criteria that have a direct correlation to ensuring success in the job. For recruitment, a good way to do this is identifying the core competencies for the position and evaluating candidates against their experience with or potential to develop those competencies. For more on this, be sure to watch our video on competencies. Number two, use a recruitment panel with a wide variety of experiences. It's fairly common for a hiring department to fill panels with people who have virtually identical experience and ways of thinking about the work or the professional field. This hinders the objective reasoning process because assumptions are validated rather than questioned. Assemble an eclectic panel who will hold each other accountable to being objective. Number three, don't keep fishing from the same pond. Hiring managers often express frustration that they just can't find people with the background, up-to-date competencies, or experience they're looking for to help their organization thrive. Yet they admit that they have been recruiting the same way they have been recruiting for years. Remember, objective reasoning takes effort. The classic example of letting assumptions cloud your decisions is that old refrain, but that's the way we've always done it, and never stopping to think that maybe that's the problem. Example 2, managing high-performing teams. Remaining objective in the already difficult job of managing people requires diligence. It's natural to find things that you have in common with other people, but when those commonalities directly cause a manager to afford those people preferential treatment, it's problematic. Allocation of resources, opportunities for career growth, and other benefits should be based on things like effort and impact, not whether a direct report likes the same music as their manager or watches the same TV shows. You can hardly keep yourself from liking another person, but you can use objective reasoning to check the decisions you make about managing people. When possible, use meaningful quantitative metrics to compare things like performance, workload, and resources across your team. You may, for instance, notice that one member of your team seems to have a greater output than another member. Maybe their turnover transactions are higher. They complete more projects, meet with more students or clients, or they're more responsive to inquiries. But upon taking a closer look, you find that the person with greater output has also been provided significantly more resources and opportunities than the other team member. Question why that is the case. Is the negatively affected direct report caught in a negative feedback loop where they don't get the resources or opportunities because the manager perceives that they are not as productive? Another important thing to remember is that just because something can be quantified does not necessarily mean that the associated numbers are meaningful. In fact, metrics can easily be misleading. Let's take that example of the number of students or clients someone meets with. Should say number of students advised per month in and of itself be the metric to focus on? What about quality of those visits? What about instances when many students may be going through a particularly difficult situation and therefore require more time? What about all the work that is important to focus on in different cycles of the academic year when student meetings are not in high demand? Performance and impact are often more nuanced than what can be shown in numbers. In such cases, assess quality, but be impartial. It's essential that mission, goals, expectations, and objectives are explicit. Put it in writing and communicate it early and often. Then tie impact to those things. How did your team's work affect the objectives of the project or the overall mission? Because there is still subjectivity involved with this process, bring your accountability partners in to assess and evaluate with you. Here too, as with the case of the eclectic recruitment panel, it is useful to have a team, colleagues, or mentors with a wide variety of experience, perspectives, and outlooks. These people will give a manager the ability to cast a wide net for identifying things like risks and opportunities. Remaining objective and listening carefully to differing opinions and considerations could be challenging, but it is a critical skill for successful people managers. This in turn will help you be successful planning strategically and being innovative in your approach. Objective reasoning should play an ever-present role in the workplace. It sometimes can take considerable effort, but the payoff is worth it. Whether you're a manager making a business case for who can work remotely, or who needs to work in the office, or an individual contributor explaining to your boss why you need more resources. It will help you get to the best outcome for you and your organization.